The early morning air was crisp and carried the faint scent of pine and damp earth. Sunlight filtered through the dense canopy, casting dancing patterns of light and shadow on the forest floor. The young woman moved quietly along a narrow path. She had taken many times before, her basket swinging gently at her side. She had ventured into the woods countless times, but today something urged her deeper than usual, beyond the familiar areas where she gathered herbs and wild berries. Perhaps it was curiosity, or perhaps the solitude called to her. Either way, she followed the winding trail that led toward the sound of running water in the distance. As she approached a secluded stream, the soft gurgle of water over smooth stones filled her ears. The stream curved gently, bordered by moss-covered rocks and tall grasses that swayed in the morning breeze. It was a place she had passed by before but never truly explored, a hidden corner of the forest that seemed untouched by human hands. She paused, taking in the serenity, the way the sunlight sparkled on the water's surface. It was then that she noticed him, a figure crouched at the water's edge, washing himself with meticulous care, the Alpha Apache. She had heard stories of him from locals and travelers, whispered tales of his strength and fearsome skill in battle, of his command over his people, and of the reverence he inspired even among neighboring tribes. Yet seeing him in person was unlike anything she had imagined. He was larger than life, his muscular frame honed from years of living in the wilderness, moving with an effortless grace that seemed almost animalistic. Every motion was precise and controlled, from the way he scooped water over his shoulders to the way he rinsed his hair. She found herself frozen in awe, her heart pounding, her breath caught in her throat. She instinctively sought cover behind a cluster of rocks and a fallen tree trunk. The leaves brushed against her arms as she crouched. Lower, peering through the gaps, careful not to make a sound. Her mind raced. She knew she should turn back, leave before he noticed her presence. Yet something kept her rooted in place. It was not merely curiosity, it was fascination. She had never seen a man like him before. The raw power of his body, combined with a quiet intensity in his gaze, made her feel both insignificant and strangely drawn. As she watched, she began to notice the subtler details, the way he paused to listen to the forest, the gentleness with which he treated the small creatures that approached, the care in his movements that suggested respect for the natural world. This was a man shaped by the wilderness, strong yet deeply attuned to his surroundings. She felt a mixture of fear and admiration. Fear because she knew the legends of his temper, and admiration because she could see the intelligence and discipline behind the raw strength that seemed to define him. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. She observed him as he splashed water onto his face, then ran his hands through his dark, damp hair. Sunlight glinted off the water droplets clinging to his skin, highlighting the contours of muscles honed through relentless survival. She had never imagined seeing anything so commanding. It was as though the forest itself had conspired to reveal this secret, and she was the only witness. But along with awe came an undeniable, confusing flutter deep in her chest. She had never been close to a man like this, and the sight stirred feelings she barely understood. Her cheeks flushed, and she felt a rush of excitement she couldn't name. She quickly reminded herself that she was an intruder in a private moment, and one wrong move could be disastrous. She needed to remain unseen, to retreat, yet a strange pull kept her eyes fixed on him. Eventually, the Alpha Apache rose from the water, his movements deliberate and commanding. He draped a roughhide over his shoulders and began to move away from the stream, stepping onto the rocks with ease, unaware of her presence. As she watched him disappear into the trees, her heart still racing, she realized something had changed within her. She could not forget what she had seen, and a part of her wanted to return, to watch him again, despite the danger. The forest, the stream, and the man she had glimpsed had etched themselves into her mind, leaving her with a mixture of wonder, fear, and an undeniable curiosity that would not be denied. In that hidden clearing, she had discovered more than just a man bathing in a stream. She had glimpsed a force of nature, a presence that would alter the course of her life in ways she could not yet imagine. And as she quietly made her way back home, the images of him, the strength, the confidence, the commanding aura lingered in her mind, planting the first seeds of a fascination that would grow into something far more intense and complicated in the days to come. Days passed, but the memory of the Alpha Apache at the stream refused to leave her mind. Each morning, she found herself drawn back into the forest as if some invisible thread were pulling her toward the secluded clearing. She told herself it was curiosity, a harmless fascination, but deep down she sensed it was more than that. The urge to see him again, to witness the raw power and quiet dignity she had glimpsed, became irresistible. So she moved silently through the trees, careful to avoid leaving tracks, listening to the birdsong and the rustle of leaves, alert to every sound that might reveal her presence. When she reached the stream, relief and excitement surged through her. The water glimmered in the sunlight, just as it had before, and she remembered how the last sight of him had made her heart pound in ways she could not explain. She crouched behind the familiar cluster of rocks and reeds, her breath shallow, eyes scanning the water. And then she saw him stepping into the stream, his movements fluid and deliberate. Again, she froze in awe, as though seeing him a second time was both a gift and a risk. Over the next few days, she returned repeatedly, always hidden, always careful to remain unseen. From her vantage point, she observed the Alpha Apaches routines, how he collected water in a carved wooden bowl, how he cleaned his weapons with meticulous attention, how he ran his hands over the stream's rocks to wash away the dust and dirt accumulated in the forest. Each action, though seemingly simple, revealed a depth of discipline, patience, and intelligence she had never associated with the fierce warriors of legend. He was more than a figure of strength. He was a man shaped by survival, tradition, and instinct. She began to notice the small, almost tender gestures that humanized him. A bird had caught a worm, and he carefully placed it nearby, allowing it to escape into the grass. A squirrel darted too close to the stream, and he watched it with gentle amusement, as if the forest itself were his companion. These moments contrasted sharply with the intimidating image she had first imagined. The warrior of legend capable of terrifying his enemies, commanding loyalty and fear alike. She realized that strength did not require brutality, and power did not demand harshness. These quiet glimpses into his character fascinated her far more than any tale of battles or dominance could. Yet the tension within her grew with each visit. She understood the danger of discovery. This was a man who could crush an intruder without hesitation, and the risk she took by returning daily was real. Still, the pull was irresistible. It was not merely fascination something primal stirred within her. She found herself noticing details she had never considered before. The curve of his shoulders, the way sunlight highlighted the ridges of his muscles, the intensity in his eyes even when he was alone. Every motion, every glance seemed charged with unspoken power, and she was caught between fear and a strange, heady excitement she could neither name nor resist. As she observed, her mind began to wander. Who was he when no one was watching? Did he ever feel the loneliness she sensed behind his strong, commanding exterior? She imagined conversations that could never happen, moments shared that might never exist. And yet, she also noticed his discipline and awareness. He moved with a sense of purpose, scanning the forest as he went, alert to every sound, every rustle of leaves, every sign of danger. It was clear he could sense her presence at any moment if he chose, and the thought both thrilled and terrified her. One afternoon, she watched as he paused midstream, lifting a small stone from the water to examine it. The sunlight caught his profile, and she felt a sudden, dizzying surge of admiration and longing. She realized that her visits were no longer casual. They were becoming a ritual, a secret world in which she existed as a silent witness to his life. And yet, each time she left, the pull to return only grew stronger. The forest, the stream, and the Alpha Apache had become intertwined with her thoughts, filling her days with anticipation and restless energy. By the time she returned home each evening, she carried with her the weight of what she had seen and the thrill of knowing she had not been discovered. Her fascination was no longer simple curiosity. It had become a quiet obsession. She understood, deep within herself, that her life had changed. She had glimpsed a force beyond her understanding, and that glimpse had awakened feelings she could neither control nor ignore. Hidden in the forest, watching him, she had discovered a world both dangerous and intoxicating, and she knew she would return, drawn by something far more powerful than fear or reason. The morning was brighter than usual, sunlight piercing through the dense canopy in golden streaks that danced across the forest floor. Birds chirped insistently, and the soft murmur of the stream sounded almost louder than before, as if the world itself were alert to what was about to happen. The young woman moved with her usual careful steps, her basket swinging lightly at her side, eyes constantly scanning the undergrowth for movement. She had returned to the stream again, drawn as always by a mixture of fascination and forbidden desire. Her visits had become routine over the past days, each one a silent ritual of observation. And yet the thrill of watching the Alpha Apache had not diminished. As she neared the stream, she spotted him immediately. He was already in the water, the sunlight glinting off his broad shoulders and the rippling muscles of his back. He moved with a fluidity and precision that made her heart race. Yet there was a calmness to him, a kind of quiet authority that set him apart from anyone she had ever known. She crouched behind her usual cover, a large fallen tree and a thick clump of ferns, her eyes fixed on him. She knew she should have left, should have respected the invisible boundary of his privacy, but she could not. The pull was irresistible. She leaned forward slightly to get a better view, and in a moment of carelessness, her foot slipped on a moss-covered rock. The sharp snap of movement echoed through the forest like a gunshot. Instantly, the Alpha Apache's head shot up. His eyes, dark and piercing, scanned the forest with the alertness of a predator. For a heartbeat, she felt frozen in panic, unable to move, every instinct screaming that she had been discovered. Then she realized he was looking directly at her. Her heart pounded in her chest as she tried to shrink behind the ferns. But there was no time. He was moving toward her, his long legs striding over the rocks with unmatched agility. She felt the weight of his gaze, heavy and searching, and in that moment, she understood that she had crossed an invisible line. She wanted to apologize, to explain that she meant no harm, but no words came. Fear and awe paralyzed her. When he reached her, he stopped just a few feet away. She could see every detail of him clearly, the strength in his shoulders, the intensity of his eyes, the barely restrained power in his stance. Yet, instead of anger, she was struck by something else, a measured curiosity. He tilted his head slightly, as if weighing her carefully, analyzing her presence, her intentions. She noticed the subtle tension in his muscles, the way he was ready for any sudden move she might make, yet there was no immediate threat. He spoke finally, his voice low and controlled, carrying both authority and an unspoken warning. "Why are you here?" The words were simple, yet each one seemed to hold the weight of the forest itself. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, unable to find words that could satisfy him or herself. Her silence hung between them, heavy with the unspoken understanding that this encounter could change everything. He stepped closer, but not aggressively. There was a deliberate gentleness to his movements, a kind of controlled awareness that told her he was assessing whether she posed a threat or whether she was merely lost in a world that was not hers. Her chest heaved with a mixture of fear and fascination. She realized, in a rush of clarity, that she had been drawn to him not only because of his power, but because he represented something entirely different from the men she had known: strength, authority, and a deep connection to the world around him. The Alpha Apache's eyes softened slightly as he studied her. There was no immediate punishment, no harsh words, no anger. Instead, he extended a hand, a gesture both commanding and tentative, inviting her to rise, to step out of hiding. She hesitated, torn between instinctual fear and a strange trust that had grown from her days of secret observation. Slowly trembling, she placed her hand in his, allowing him to pull her upright. Standing before him, heart pounding and breath uneven, she felt an unspoken bond form between them, a delicate thread of understanding, fragile yet undeniable. She was no longer just an observer, hidden in the forest. She was a participant in a moment that could alter the course of her life. And though neither of them spoke of it, there was a shared awareness that this encounter marked the beginning of something dangerous, intoxicating, and transformative. The forest seemed to hold its breath around them. The stream flowed quietly, the birds were still, and for a fleeting moment, the world narrowed to the space between her and the Alpha Apache. She realized, with a mixture of fear and anticipation, that she had glimpsed not just the body of a man, but the essence of a force she could neither control nor resist, and that he, too, had sensed it. After the fateful encounter at the stream, the young woman felt as though the forest itself had shifted beneath her feet. No longer was she a hidden observer. She was now a participant in the Alpha Apache's world, a world both terrifying and magnetic. The memory of his piercing gaze, his quiet authority, and the strength radiating from every movement haunted her. Yet alongside the fear lingered an irresistible fascination, a pull she could neither resist nor fully comprehend. Driven by a mix of curiosity and a growing sense of attachment, she returned to the forest the next day, determined to navigate this new reality without causing offense or endangering herself. To her surprise, the Alpha Apache did not banish her from his domain. Instead, he allowed her to remain, but under strict guidance. He led her through the forest with a measured patience, teaching her how to move without disturbing the undergrowth, how to read the subtle signs of animal tracks, and how to follow the winding paths of streams without losing her way. Every step was a lesson in survival, a lesson in the rhythms of the wilderness, and she realized she was entering a world that demanded respect and discipline. The forest no longer seemed merely a place of beauty, it was a living, breathing entity, and he was both its master and guardian. She quickly came to appreciate the depth of his wisdom. While she had first been captivated by his physical strength, she now observed his intelligence and strategic mind. He could track a deer across miles of rugged terrain, anticipate the movements of rival tribes, and ensure the safety of his people. With a keen foresight that bordered on the uncanny, she watched him interact with members of his tribe, from warriors to hunters, from elders to children, and realized that his authority was earned, not demanded. He commanded respect not through fear alone, but through skill, understanding, and unwavering integrity. During these excursions, she also discovered his softer side. She saw the way he paused to ensure the youngest children of the tribe had food, how he tended to the wounded with careful hands, and how he quietly mourned losses that no one else would dare acknowledge. These glimpses of vulnerability humanized the legendary figure she had once feared, revealing a man capable of empathy and tenderness. The more she learned about him, the more complex and captivating he became. Her fascination evolved from mere admiration of his physique into a profound respect for his character, his discipline, and the burdens he bore as a leader. Yet, alongside respect, her emotions grew more complicated. There was an undeniable tension in the air whenever she was near him. Every glance, every brush of hands while climbing rocks or gathering water seemed charged with unspoken significance. She noticed the subtle way his eyes lingered on her, the way he assessed her reactions, and the silent communication that passed between them in gestures and expressions rather than words. She could not deny the stirrings of desire, nor could she ignore the fear that acting on these feelings could jeopardize everything she had come to value. The forest, once a sanctuary of solitude, had become a theater of intense emotional complexity. Despite the danger, she began to feel a cautious trust growing between them. He allowed her to witness moments he did not show to anyone else: the preparation of sacred rituals, the meticulous care of weapons, and the quiet reflection at dawn when he communed with the forest and the spirits. In these moments, she saw the full measure of his leadership, the weight of responsibility that pressed on him daily. She understood, finally, that this was a man shaped by necessity, by tradition, and by a life that demanded constant vigilance. Her admiration deepened into something resembling awe, a recognition that she was in the presence of someone extraordinary. By the end of each day, as she made her way back home, she carried more than knowledge of survival. She carried a growing sense of belonging to a world she had never imagined. She was learning not just how to move through the forest, but how to exist within it, how to respect its rules, and how to see the Alpha Apache not merely as a figure of desire, but as a mentor, a protector, and a man whose complexities challenged her understanding of strength and loyalty. In those days of quiet observation and guided lessons, she realized that her life had shifted irreversibly. She was no longer the naive girl peering from behind the ferns, hidden and fearful. She was part of a fragile bond being woven in silence, learning his ways, earning his cautious trust, and discovering that the world of the Alpha Apache was as beautiful, demanding, and intoxicating as the man himself. The forest had become a classroom, a stage, and a crucible, shaping her in ways that would define her for the rest of her life. As the days turned into weeks, the young woman found herself more deeply entangled in the Alpha Apache's world than she could have ever imagined. What had begun as mere curiosity had grown into something far more complex, a potent mixture of admiration, fascination, and an undeniable attraction she could neither fully control nor deny. She felt the pull of his presence like a current in a river, drawing her closer with every glance, every shared silence, every subtle brush of their hands as he guided her through the forest. And though she tried to temper her emotions with reason, she knew she was teetering on the edge of a danger that was far greater than the wilderness itself. The Alpha Apache, too, seemed aware of the tension between them. Though he maintained the disciplined composure expected of a leader, she began to notice subtle changes in his behavior. His glances lingered just a moment too long, his tone carried a faint warmth when addressing her, and his patience, already remarkable, seemed to extend to her in ways it did not to others. It was as if he, too, felt the pull of an unspoken connection, a shared understanding that was both forbidden and irresistible. Every time their eyes met, a silent communication passed between them, fraught with unspoken desire, mutual respect, and the tension of what could and could not be. Yet the forest was not a sanctuary free from danger. Word of her presence had begun to spread beyond the boundaries of the Alpha Apache's tribe. Rival groups, always vigilant for weakness, began to notice a newcomer moving near the territory. Whispers traveled through the surrounding lands, and Soon she became more than a hidden observer. She was a potential target, a symbol that could be exploited to challenge the Alpha's authority. One morning, as she ventured slightly further from the usual path, she glimpsed signs that she was being watched: broken twigs, disturbed underbrush, and the faint echo of voices carried by the wind. Panic surged through her chest, but she kept moving, knowing that revealing fear could be dangerous. The Alpha Apache recognized the danger immediately. He appeared at her side with uncanny swiftness, his presence alone enough to send a warning to unseen observers. His eyes, dark and alert, swept the forest around them, noting every detail, every subtle sign of intrusion. Without words, he conveyed both protection and command. She was safe with him, but the threat was real, and they could not afford carelessness. For the first time, the young woman felt the stark reality of the world she had stepped into. Her fascination and desire were no longer abstract emotions, they had tangible consequences, and her very life depended on navigating them wisely. The days that followed were filled with tension and closeness. She trained under his watchful eye, learning not only survival skills but also how to move stealthily, how to read the signs of the forest, and how to anticipate danger before it arrived. In these moments, their bond deepened. They shared glances that spoke volumes, brief touches that carried electric tension, and quiet moments of laughter that seemed to exist outside the perils surrounding them. The attraction simmered beneath the surface, a delicate and dangerous current that neither dared to fully acknowledge aloud. Yet the danger forced them into cooperation. When scouts from the rival tribes made their approach, the Alpha Apache guided her through hidden paths, teaching her to move silently, to anticipate threats, and to rely on instincts she had never trusted before. In these high-stakes moments, fear and desire intertwined. She discovered that attraction could exist alongside terror, that trust could be forged in the midst of imminent danger, and that courage could blossom even in the presence of overwhelming uncertainty. Each successful evasion, each narrow escape, strengthened their bond and heightened the intensity of the unspoken emotions between them. By the end of this period, the young woman realized that her life had irrevocably changed. She was no longer a passive observer, merely witnessing the Alpha Apache's existence from afar. She had become a participant in a dangerous, intoxicating world where trust, loyalty, and desire were intertwined with survival. She had discovered not only the power of the man she admired, but also her own capacity for courage, intelligence, and resilience. And through it all, the simmering attraction between them grew an undercurrent of passion and longing that neither dared name aloud, yet that would define the choices, risks, and sacrifices to come. In the forest, amidst the rustle of leaves and the flowing stream, danger and desire existed side by side, shaping their bond into something both forbidden and profound. It was a connection that would test them, challenge them, and ultimately reveal the depths of their courage, loyalty, and the intensity of the human heart when faced with fear, temptation, and the extraordinary power of attraction. The tension in the forest had reached its peak. For weeks, the young woman and the Alpha Apache had navigated a delicate dance of trust, desire, and survival. Every glance and subtle gesture between them carried unspoken meaning, yet their bond was about to be tested in ways neither could have anticipated. The rival tribes, sensing opportunity, had grown bolder, and the forest that had once felt like a secret sanctuary now seemed to pulse with imminent danger. Each step she took through the undergrowth was shadowed by the knowledge that discovery could come at any moment, and the stakes had never been higher. It began on a quiet morning, a kind of morning when the forest seemed to hold its breath. The young woman had ventured slightly ahead of the Alpha Apache, picking herbs and noting the subtle signs of wildlife. She felt a strange confidence in her movements, a confidence born from days of learning his ways, yet she remained acutely aware of the perils surrounding them. Then she heard a soft, deliberate crack of a branch. Her body stiffened. She froze, straining to hear over the pounding of her own heart. Out of the corner of her eye, she glimpsed movement, shadows, shifting between the trees, too calculated to be natural. She was being watched. The Alpha Apache reacted before she could even call out. He appeared beside her with almost supernatural speed, his presence radiating command. His eyes swept the forest with razor-sharp precision, and his posture signaled both protection and readiness. Without words, he directed her to move silently behind him, his movements fluid and controlled. She followed instinctively, trusting him completely, the bond they had forged now a lifeline. For the first time, she truly understood the meaning of his strength, not just physical, but a combination of intelligence, experience, and unwavering authority. The rival scouts advanced, and the forest became a battlefield of stealth and strategy. The young woman watched in awe as he assessed every detail, the angle of sunlight through the trees, the sound of distant water, the slight rustle of underbrush, and predicted the enemy's movements. He whispered instructions, precise and minimal, guiding her through hidden paths she had never noticed before. With every step, she felt the mixture of fear and exhilaration that had come to define their shared moments. Danger, once abstract, was now immediate, tangible, and it bound them together in ways words could not capture. At one critical moment, the enemy drew too close. She froze, paralyzed with fear, and for the first time she felt the stark vulnerability of being entirely in his world. But he did not falter. Without hesitation, he positioned himself between her and the threat, his movements swift, decisive, and almost breathtaking in their precision. In that instant, she realized that the Alpha Apache's strength was not just in his body, it was in his mind, his instincts, and the unshakable sense of responsibility he carried for those he cared about. The danger passed, but its intensity lingered, leaving her chest heaving and her mind spinning. In the aftermath, as the forest slowly returned to its natural rhythm, he turned to her, and for the first time, there was no distance between them. Their eyes met, dark and intense, and the unspoken emotions that had simmered beneath the surface erupted into acknowledgment. He spoke softly, almost reluctantly, revealing the weight of his feelings and the complexities of his position. She listened, heart pounding, as he described the responsibilities, dangers, and sacrifices that came with being an alpha, and she understood that the bond they shared was both extraordinary and fragile. In that moment, the young woman felt a profound transformation within herself. She was no longer an outsider peeking from the shadows. She had earned her place beside him through courage, intelligence, and loyalty. The fear that had once defined her was replaced with determination, respect, and a growing awareness of the depth of her own strength. She realized that attraction, admiration, and trust were not separate forces, they were intertwined, shaping a connection that transcended simple desire or fascination. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the forest in amber and shadow, they stood together by the stream where it had all begun. The Alpha Apache's hand brushed hers, tentative yet deliberate, and in that simple gesture lay acknowledgement, acceptance, and a promise of what their bond could become. She had witnessed his power, shared in his world, and survived danger at his side, and in return he had recognized her courage, intelligence, and the potential for something deeper between them. Both of them had emerged changed. He, acknowledging vulnerability in the presence of trust and connection. She, stepping into her own strength and agency. Together they faced the world with a newfound understanding of one another, a connection, forged in danger, respect, and desire, and tempered by the challenges they had endured. In the quiet that followed, the forest seemed to sigh, as if acknowledging that something extraordinary the rest of their lives, and a story that was only just beginning.